we'll move finally to number 9 on the agenda, which is around hate crime. And again, just by way of introduction, that has been a priority within the police and crime plan for some time. Again, it's connected to the supporting people by harm by crime strategy. As you know, I do commission victim support services in West Yorkshire, and we've definitely incorporated hate crime reporting within that, and looking at how we address it through restorative justice in some cases as well. And the Safer Communities Fund has actually supported 81 projects tackling hate crime, so there's clearly a lot of interest out there amongst many of our diverse communities in West Yorkshire, and encouraging that we do have regular input from the Youth Advisory Group, who recently produced a video highlighting some of the issues around hate crime. So I'll ask for an update. Thank you.
Sure. So again, it's another complex report really, with lots of statistics in there, and I'll do my best to summarise it as best I can. But the national overview was there was 103,000 hate crimes recorded by the police in England and Wales in 2018 to 19, an increase of 10% in comparison to 17 to 18. Over half, 54% of hate crimes recorded by the police were for public order offences, and a further 36% were for violence against the person offences, 5% criminal damage and arson. And I have to say that that national perspective is also reflected locally as well, so we are not out of proportion in any way, shape or form. But some local context into West Yorkshire. In 2018 there were 8,330 hate incidents to the police, of which they were converted to crime 7,948. In 2019 there was 8,254 hate incidents, which actually translated into 8,240 crimes. So slightly less incidents, but more crimes, which again goes towards our crime data integrity and ethical crime recording stance that we have. So when I talk about incidents, I mean crimes as well, because we are there. Crime increases have been reported across a number of strands within West Yorkshire and nationally, such as public order, a low level of violence with injury. So that's where hate crime actually does sit, as I've just outlined. We do have mechanisms within force to paint an accurate picture of tensions using partners and also our own key individual networks, and we are extremely well connected with National Community Tension Team. We're also NPCC lead as well. From a force point of view, I do actually chair the region for the northern regions, which means that we have that direct link in there. But what that also gives for us is a really, really good understanding of what's going on nationally, best practice, what we can share, and also sharing what the impact is with our communities as well. Satisfaction, overall satisfaction for victims of hate incidents and crimes within 12 months to December 2019 stands at 63.2%, which is disappointing. It's a reduction of 5.7% in comparison to the previous 12 months. The way that breaks down, it's a reduction in satisfaction, the way that victims feel that they're being kept informed of progress, which we know has been an age-long issue within the service, and we have got many actions moving forward to try and alleviate that. Actions taken is there as well, treatment by officers and staff who dealt with them, but the biggest contributor is telephone investigation for non-attended crimes and incidents. People are just not satisfied with that, and we understand the reasons why. We're doing our best to put fixes in there to obviously reassure people. So a number of actions have been identified to improve satisfaction for all crime and incidents. They've been incorporated into a force satisfaction action plan. This includes better training for staff and ensuring appropriate referral mechanisms are in place for victims. So it's that support network that we can provide to people. There is no significant difference in satisfaction between responses by ethnicity, gender or age. However, we do know that people with a disability are less likely to be satisfied with the overall service they've received than for those who don't have a disability. As I go through the multiple strands there, I'll spend more time probably on race hate, and that is not because the other ones aren't as equally as important, it's because that actually equates for 3/4 of our demand, our incidents. So race hate incidents related for around 3/4 of the incidents recorded in West Yorkshire, and of course 3/4 hate crimes recorded, which is actually reassuring. It's a similar national picture. Doesn't make it any better, but it's a similar national picture. The repeat victimisation rate for race hate incidents is at 21%, and that has held stable since January 2019. Again, that's disappointing that 2 out of 10 people are actually victims again in the future, but it's actually reassuring for us that people feel that they can tell us again they've been a victim. So that's what's really important, is educate and to obviously know where the hotspots might be. So where a suspect was identified for race hate incidents, 12.8% suspects had been involved in one or more hate incidents in the previous 12 months. What that does, that presents opportunities for problem solving and interventions, and as by way of reassurance, our local policing governance board that we've just held this month, we dip sampled those within districts to understand the plans behind people who commit multiple offences, to ensure that there was a robust partnership plan of education and then enforcement to, of course, reduce those victims of crime. The number of arrests made at race hate incidents has fallen in the last 12 months to 677, reflecting a downward trend in the overall arrest rate, which has gone from 13.8% a year ago to 11.8% in the latest period. So a total of 6,025 race hate crimes were recorded in the last 12 months, with a total of 607, or 9.5%, outcomes resulting in police action against the suspect. So there were 3,021, or 47% of outcomes where the suspect was identified, but the decision was not taken to proceed with the criminal justice process. And I've broken that down into 3 different areas for you. So it's police decision, suspect identified, but evidential difficulties was around 18%. The suspect was identified, but the CPS decided on 2% of the occasions that we shouldn't pursue. But then the biggest and probably the most worrying is the fact that victims refuse to support the prosecution. But that does lend itself to us being an organisation that's victim focused, and not everybody wants to go through the CGS process because it's obviously stressful. If I then move down to disability hate incidents, which is the next one there, which is a notable one to raise, they've increased significantly in volume and stand at 897 for 2018, which is up by 326, which is 57.1% in the period. In the period 2019, the volume of disability hate incidents reduced by 12%, but again, that's not something that we can lay back on our laurels and think that things are improving. We need to continue to understand what's actually occurring. For the last 12 months, the number of repeat victims was extremely high again, at 31.8%, or 279, and the number of repeat suspects was actually at 11.9%. So a total of 856 disability hate crimes recorded in the last 12 months, and 1,174 outcomes recorded with relatively few charges, which is 3, which is extremely low, or other outcomes for the offenders at 18. So that's only at 1.9%. So a third of outcomes identified as evidential difficulties prohibiting a charge, and we know what these actual offences are. This is going to be a passing comments from people who are not known by the victim, so therefore it's really, really difficult to actually investigate it. But what it does for us, and we encourage it, is it enables us to understand the hotspots for where this might be occurring, and the demographic for the offenders as well, so we can target our resources and any early action that we choose to take. Sexual orientation hate. Sexual orientation incidents increased significantly, again similar to disability, to 935 for 2018, which is up 262, or around 40%. And for 2019, the volume has increased to 1,007, an increase of 72, or 7.7. But this again does show that increase in confidence and awareness by our communities that they can report through the multiple reporting lines that we have. Transphobic hate incidents are relatively low in volume, but increased significantly to stand at 176 for 2018, an 83% increase, and for 2019, 225 incidents, which again is 27.8. And these are only small numbers, but they're really, really important to the victims of crime, the people who are actually abused on our streets. But again, this increase does show confidence within that community that they can come forward and they can speak to us. The number of repeat victims is really high at 57% or 124 in the last 12 months. Again, it just goes to evidence that confidence. And nearly 84% of incidents relate to violence or public order, so a significantly high amount. So ongoing work and developments. So due to the relatively low numbers of crimes in comparison to other crime types, and I must point out any number of crimes is too many. There is no defined real hotspots. What we do see is we see hotspots or areas with high crime types, just reflected. So Leeds and Bradford, for example, they have the majority of the crimes. But the nighttime economy does mean that drunk and rowdy behaviour can result in hate crimes, incidents being committed against people who work on public transport, at fast food outlets, and taxi drivers, for example, a significant proportion of our statistics. We are working really closely with local authorities and partners and agencies and our communities as well to raise awareness and encourage that reporting and actually increase that confidence. We are expanding the work that we undertake with young perpetrators of hate crime to ensure that the appropriate interventions are put in place to prevent repeat offending. This is that education strand that we need to do. We need to continue to reinforce it with partners, and early action will hopefully divert them away from future offending and change that behaviour long term. The force has also recruited 2 police service volunteers who are from the trans community, and they help deliver awareness training to staff. They also give advice about positive engagement and how to increase victim confidence in reporting, which is evident in the figures that we've seen there. And something which as an organisation we're really, really proud of is the Hate Crime Action Plan that we've created, that brings together all the recommendations from not just HMIC but other recommendations which we as a force can actually look in there and develop moving forward. And as a result of that, we've actually developed an I Learn training package for staff, which I would really commend to anybody to actually watch. It is extremely humbling to watch the impact. But within there's education about legislation, what it really means, and we're hoping to drive this home to officers and staff and partners who actually use that resource. And this is something that may be going national as well. It's the best resource that is actually out there at this moment in time. The Hate Crime App has been built and is currently in a testing phase. What this will do for us, it was actually assist us in identifying the hotspots, the individuals, the demographics, and really give us that intelligent insight into hate crime so we can put our resources where we need to do. West Yorkshire Police continue to be represented on the CPS Regional Scrutiny Panel, which identifies lesson learning for the policing partners through the CGS process, which is then fed back to the individuals concerned and obviously documented. That gives us that full learning cycle so we get to understand the reasons why a matter might not progress. And as I've already raised, we have a really good insight into the National Police Chief Council's view and the drive centrally from there as well. And that's about the summary of the paper. Any questions?
No, thank you. There's a lot of work and information in there, so thanks for that. As you say, I always approach this with a bit of a health warning, because whilst none of us want to see increases, whether it's in actual numbers or percentages, I think it's always a bit of a double-edged sword for me, this one, regarding acknowledging that there is more confidence in reporting of these, which is a positive, but clearly trying to understand why some of the repeat offences in particular are being committed against certain individuals and for what reasons, and then understanding why. Again, I've said this before, but I'm not sure whether everybody necessarily expects some kind of criminal outcome anyway. It's more around how the person that is committing a hate crime is actually dealt with in a proportionate way and sort of reminded of the sort of harm that they are committing on somebody else. So in relation to that, in the report it does talk about some examples. So taxi drivers are mentioned as a category within there, around groups that underreport potentially, and it's you know, what more can we do to make sure that all categories and all situations are reported where they can be?
I think as an organisation we are realistic and mature enough to know that people do not report every single incident that occurs. And when you look at some of the categories where people probably don't have the confidence to report, such as taxi drivers, there is an element of it does take time to do so, and that costs them money at the end of the evening. And I know this from speaking to taxi drivers myself, that's part of the reason why they don't. So we do know there's definitely an under-reporting element there. It's about us just ensuring that people know the importance of it, even if it's not about going through the criminal justice system process. It is about us understanding where it's occurring. Definitely the demographic of the offenders, really, really important, so we can channel our efforts at education and deterring people from committing the offences in the first place, because we know from you know, the 40% of people who don't want to pursue a criminal case, it's really important that we prevent those moving forward. But what we're doing in relation to some of the crime types is that we are moving much quicker, for example, in relation to disability, hate crime or other crimes, to support people, whether that's on the phone, using our hate crime coordinators. So really it's about us taking a holistic approach to it, understanding that people won't report all the time, but actually making the best of the opportunities that we can when people do report.
Yeah, you know, no thanks to that. You know, obviously I was at an event with you earlier this year regarding, or last year in, regarding disability hate crime. As you referenced in the report as well there, Richard, you know, the victim satisfaction levels have declined, unfortunately, in some of these cases. And it's really just asking what sort of positive actions are we taking to try and address that. And, you know, again, what is your view regarding some of the CJS issues that might be affecting that as well?
Yeah, so it is worrying that satisfaction levels have dropped, without doubt, but within there's a context of the fact that we have increased reporting, and although we haven't reached a capacity of we can't deal with any more incidents, we have to appreciate that with more and more reports it becomes more and more difficult to give that one-to-one service, which is why I think it's around 13% or maybe even higher of people are dissatisfied when they have a telephone investigation. So there is some context in there. With the more reports that you get, actually, it will be a struggle to ensure that satisfaction remains high. But it's something that we are concentrating on, which is why we're into the iLearn package as well, which is a tool that we can use to ensure that staff understand, staff are educated. Within there's understanding about legislation, about referral mechanisms that we can use to support people. So hopefully we'll start to see that start to turn around. If I'm honest with you, and looking at how timescales of the surveys run, I can't see any kind of improvements in the satisfaction for the next 6 to 12 months. I think it will take a significant amount of time for this to go through the organisation. But in support of that, we do have hate crime coordinators at district. We are reviewing what they do to ensure that it's not a postcode lottery of where the hate crime occurs to how much support you have. We're aware of some issues where some staff are working to the max, whereas others potentially could actually take some of that demand away from them. So we're looking at what a hate crime coordinator does, how they can better support people, how they can actually provide a wraparound support as well, which will hopefully increase that satisfaction. But from a CJ perspective, I am back to, I do sound like a broken record, of the fact that not a lot of people, around 50% of people actually don't want a CJ result. They want it to be reported, they want it to be taken seriously, they want to assist us and support us, and so we will encourage that reporting all day long. But we are back also to the investigations work that we're doing. We're doing an investigations review to ensure that we're capturing evidence as early as possible, that we're taking those good quality statements, and that actually we're supporting victims of crime.
Yeah. Okay. And then, I mean, obviously, the partnerships are really important here as well, because clearly, whether it might be through victim support, for example, where referrals to third party or other organisations might actually, one, take a bit of demand off the police, and secondly, ultimately have a better outcome for victims. So it's just making sure what we are doing in terms of awareness around referrals to other organisations who might be able to provide more support.
And that will feature in the training and the work that's ongoing with the district training days going out to the front line, because I totally agree with you. There's, you know, it's about getting that provision to it.
Yeah.
I'm fighting with GDPR to just make sure we're doing what we can. We've got to get the permission of individuals. People, I feel strongly it's down to our staff to explain the benefits in a bit more detail and a bit more understanding of where they can get support outside of policing for it. So again, that'll come through the training, but I think the referrals have started to increase now across all crime types. But certainly you're right, this is one area that the third sector, victim support, can really help us with.
Yeah, good. So, according to the data, there were 319 incidents of race, faith-based criminal damage in 2019. Do these show any geographic trends or certain areas that are being targeted?
Again, we're back to the fact that one crime is one too many. I'm not undermining that, but because it's such a small number within a force or within areas such as West Yorkshire, it doesn't show any hugely geographical hotspots. We know that transport hubs are significant areas, and other areas where you might expect many people to be in one location in the night-time economy, but generally you are looking at the bigger districts such as Leeds and Bradford, where you've got the larger population areas, and that's where the more crimes actually sit.
Again,
Yeah,
there's nothing specific. I'm saying it's all at mosques, or it's all at Gurdwaras, or it's all against the Jewish community. Again, it quite rightly comes down to perception as well. If it's a very clear graffiti with abusive language on, it's very clearly led. If it's actually damage at a property, it's a perception as to whether it is, and so we err on the side of caution. Everything's recorded, but there's nothing that says a specific targeting. But the hate crime coordinators and the crime analysts will pick up any patterns or any likelihood of patterns as well. The harder one sometimes is to work through, you know, as we've seen before in Leeds, is, you know, repeated damage to taxis or repeated abuse of taxis that are then in a more not always reported, to try and pick that together. I'm really confident that if there's any specifically faith-based against religious establishments, we're very quick to pick it up with a number of policing teams and get on top of those.
yeah, no, well, you know, clearly, John, that's what I'm trying to get at there, because those types of targeted attacks on certain establishments can clearly have a much wider sort of knock-on effect, and it's just that making sure we are sighted and on top of that. Then just finally, I'm sorry to raise it again around coronavirus, but have we picked up any potential hate crime in relation to connections of coronavirus?
No, not yet, but when I go back, I'll speak to Mr Kingsman as well and feed that into the goal to make sure that there has been some nationally, I think there's been, you know, just hate and abuse against people, not necessarily race related but coronavirus related, but that then has implications of where you've come from. Certainly from the Chinese community and other areas have received some. But I'll make sure Tim Kingsman's got that as well as we move forward.
We do have a force-wide community impact assessment running, and we're not reporting any considerable increase, but we are feeding in again to the centre to understand what's happening.
Yeah, it's one to keep an eye on. So, you know, anecdotally, I've certainly picked up one or two things which is totally unacceptable, to be honest. But okay, thank you for that. That's the last main item